Hi, welcome to another Practical Project Management webinar. Today we're going to talk about seeing the whole. This is systems analysis and process analysis and things that make those up. So let's get started. As usual, we'll start with some information about me, so anyone who hasn't been to one of my webinars before has some level of confidence that I know what I'm talking about. My name is Kim Watson. My educational background is a bachelor's in computer science from Cal State and a master's in industrial engineering and in engineering management from Stanford. Before I became a consultant, I held positions from line engineer to vice president, and I used project management and systems analysis tools and techniques and concepts in every position at every company. I worked at companies as big as IBM and eBay and as small as brand new startups. I started IBBay Consulting 10 years ago, and I specialize in providing tailored solutions. I do project and program management, and I coach project and program managers. I untangle messy projects. I do process engineering, process improvement, and I help folks with time management. I work a lot with distributed and international teams, so I know how that works. And you can see more about IBBay and about me at www.ibbay.com. So let's get started. What will we talk about today? We're going to talk about systems analysis, as well as process improvement and business analysis. We'll walk through functional decomposition, which is systems and process business analysis. I mean, this technique is used in a lot of places. We'll talk about data flows and data flow diagrams, which are a systems analysis technique. And of course, we will walk through an example or two. And at the end, we'll, as always, wrap up with things that are important to take away from this. So let's get started. First, let's define systems analysis. There's a very formal definition, but it's pretty accurate. It's a problem-solving technique. But what it does is it breaks a system down into its component pieces in order to understand how they work together and how well they work together. Systems analysis can be used on a single complex system, like let's say for a complex application or a business function. Systems analysis is often used. The concepts and techniques are often used in process analysis, although the names differ. But systems analysis is typically for automated systems. But the whole idea is to understand the pieces and how the pieces of any complex system interact with each other. Now, systems analysis is different than business analysis and a little different than process analysis, but they overlap. So business analysis specifically translates a manual process, a business process, into some specifications to automate that process. So business analysis is where understanding the business and understanding automation come together. So systems analysis might use the output of business analysis to understand why systems flow together, what's happening on the business end of them, and maybe to understand an automated system component. So it will combine, systems analysis will combine all those little pieces of business analysis into a bigger view. So you can see all of a complex system or a series of complex systems and how they work together. Many companies actually have systems and procedures analysts who do process analysis as well as systems analysis. Process analysis is really pretty much systems analysis, but it's not obviously as concerned with automation. And systems analysis typically refers to something that has to do with computers, but really the tools and techniques can be used for any kind of a complex system. I'm going to show you at one point a complex system map that has nothing to do with computer automation, just so you can see what those look like. So let's talk first about functional decomposition. So Usually you do a functional decomposition for one of two reasons. You have an existing application and it's not documented. So no one really knows what it does, and when new people try to use it, it's hard. So that's one use of it. More often it's used for that same kind of undocumented system that's going to be replaced by a new piece of automation, a new application. So first you have to understand what the current one does before you can move forward and see, how you match up requirements. So that breakdown is called a functional decomposition. It's not really dependent on how data flows through the system. That's data flow diagrams and analysis and things that we'll talk about later. It really is trying to get a handle on all of the functions that are provided in an application. If someone who knows an application really well does a functional decomposition, chances are that person is going to miss some things for a number of reasons, the biggest of which is the person makes assumptions. They just do things going through the system without thinking. Another thing that can happen with someone very familiar with the system is they only use a part of the system, and there are functions that either other people use or that aren't being used at all that the person doesn't know about. So if you are very familiar with an application and you're trying to do a functional decomposition, my best advice to you is to have someone sit with you while you walk them through how you're using the system, because someone who's not familiar with it is going to ask you questions. Why did you do that? How did you get there? And they're going to actually help you draw out those assumptions so that you can get a more complete analysis of the system. Usually the presentation, at least at first, is in an outline form and it has text. So what you're trying to do here is not completely document all the details of the system. You're not writing a manual. You're not writing help. You are understanding what the functions are. You're understanding what this application is provided. And so usually the fastest, easiest, and most understandable way of doing that is in an outline form. Now, at some point, you may want to put it in a block diagram because, first of all, if you have folks who process visually better than they do text, that's going to help them understand more quickly. And the other thing is, if you are documenting an existing system because you are going to replace it, you can, we've talked about Moscow ratings before, must, should, could, won't, and anything that you're, for example, not going to provide in a new system, you can mark those blocks in different colors. And so it provides not only a map of the functionality of an existing system, but information on what is important to be transferred to a new system. But the fastest way to get through it and get it going is to put it in an outline form. If one of the ways that you go through, that you do a functional decomposition, is you put the system in front of you, you have a test version of it, and you start pressing buttons. You walk through every menu, you walk through every drop down, you walk through every ribbon bar option, and you press buttons the whole way through so that you tease out all the functionality. Now, with older systems, a lot of times they're not necessarily arranged in order of functionality. Someone thought of this other neat thing that they could do, and they were in this screen when they did it, so you press a button on that screen, but the functionality really doesn't go along with that. So once you do the decomposition, you may want to rearrange it so the functionality is grouped in ways that are going to make it easier both to describe the current functionality and to look at potential new implementations by function. And it may be hierarchical. Actually, it often is hierarchical. Part of the reason is menu breakdown. Is if you're looking at a ribbon bar and you have drop downs and you have a lot of options, you could do it that way. And part of it is just to get deeper into the functionality in ways that are more easily understood. So here is an example. This was at least at one point going online to Amazon. This was a functional decomposition. Now you can see that the only thing that I've really broken down here is orders. But I use this because most many people are familiar with Amazon. And so you can see that the major functions have a 1.0, 2.0, 3.0 designation. That's pretty common because it's a lot easier to reference the functions, and it's a lot easier if you end up with a block diagram or some other diagram to go back to them. It's also easier to expand and contract depending on what view that you're wanting. So you can see that your account, I've broken into orders, wallet, settings, digital, content, and personalization. And then I've further broken down orders. Obviously, there are other breakdowns of other pieces of this, but this is just an example so that you understand what it looks like. Now, if you actually go to Amazon and look at orders, all of these functions are not in one place. They're not showing off of one menu. You have to go to a couple of different menus to get them because they're organized by context. But what you want to do in a functional decomposition is understand the functions. You're not worried about the context at this point, and so I've grouped them all in this way. So this is really what a functional decomposition looks like. It may be expanded so that you can get further requirements or further understanding where you say, you know, open order shows this kind of information. But on your original functional decomposition, this is really what you're looking for so that you can map these functions onto something new, or so that if you are documenting a system, you have the outline first and then you can fill in the details afterwards. This can also be very useful for writing help, but sometimes organizing help by function, if they're not available in the same place, is a little difficult. You have to do a lot of cross-referencing to make that work. So this is really a systems analysis tool. So that's functional decomposition. Let's move on and we'll talk about data flows and data flow diagrams. So this is a big systems and procedures tool. And what it does not trace functionality, it traces data. So it takes data coming into a system and tracks it, all where it's transformed, where it's stored, where it comes from, where it goes. So data flow diagrams are the documentation tool for data flows. Gain and Sarson are the authors. They have a book on data flows, and that is the seminal reference. It is, oh Lord, probably 30 years old, and it's still in use. This is a very, very straightforward documentation system. The flows can be extremely complex. The diagrams can look very complex, but they're very easy to interpret because there are very few pieces to it. There are only 3 primary agents. So these are 3 kinds of boxes in a data flow diagram. The first is a process step. That means something's happening to the data. The second is a data store. That means the data is stored somewhere. Now, when you're looking at automated systems, that's usually in a file or a database, but this works just as well for manual systems where your data store might be a manila folder, a file folder. And the third one is an external entity. That means the data is coming from somewhere outside the system you're documenting or going to somewhere outside the system you're documenting. And that's really all it is. Processes are broken down by levels. So you will have a high-level view of the system, and then each process box in that high-level view of the system is going to break down. So that top level is going to be 1.0, 2.0, 3.0, much in the same way that the functional decomposition hierarchy broke down. And then you'll have a separate page or separate diagram for the 1.0 process breakdown, and that goes 1.1, 1.2, 1.3, and you could keep going depending on how complex the process is. So here's an example data flow diagram. I like this one because it's pretty simple, although having used it quite a bit, it is actually missing some things. But this is a library system, and you can see it starts at 3.1. So this is about ordering books, and so somewhere on a higher level diagram there is a 3.0 order new books, but this is the process as it's broken down. So here's an external entity. They're squares: the patron, the library person, me, coming in to order a book. These are typically designated by a small letter, a lowercase letter, and that same letter, wherever patron appears anywhere in this system data flow diagram documentation, 3.0, 4.0, 1.0, anywhere it appears, it's going to have an R associated with it so that you can always tell. So here we have a patron, we have a book supplier, Dinosaur County, which I think it's probably actually a real county, but it's a county. And then there's a catalog service, and those are all external to the system. And we're going to walk through this as though it's a manual system. At this point, it's probably quite automated, but we're going to walk through it as though it's a manual system. This is a process box, this rectangle with the rounded corners. Typically, they have the process number at the top, and they have who's doing it at the bottom. So there's a huge amount of information in this simple little diagram. And this open-ended rectangle is a data store. And typically, they will have something, an identifier on it. This has numbers. Most often, you'll see a letter with a D, so D1, D2, D3. And it tells you what it is. So let's walk through this. These arrows represent data flowing somewhere. And what data is flowing is listed on the arrow. So in this case, we have the patron. I walk into the library and I tell them the title and author of the book that I'd like to see in the library. Some department chooses the books to order from all the stuff that the patrons have brought in. Once they pick that, they take the title and author for all of those books and they order them. So this is another process. Purchasing orders the books. They send the order to the book supplier outside of the system. They also, when they order the book, they put that purchase order in a file. So let's assume this is a file folder. They just take this piece of paper that they've sent to the book supplier. There's a copy of it. They put it in this file, and it has all the details of the order. Now the book supplier is going to send back the confirmation, right? So purchasing, when they get this, so now it's going to have come in snail mail. They're going to get the order details. They're going to pull out the file folder, look at that purchase order, and make sure that they're the same. And then they're going to mark it. Yeah, it was confirmed by the book supplier. Eventually, the book supplier is going to send a shipment with an invoice. Purchasing is going to open up the box. They're going to have this purchase order file, and they're going to pull the order. And they are going to mark on that piece of paper how many of the books that they got, and they're going to put it back in the file. If books came in that were wrong, they go back to the book supplier. Okay. So when they receive the book, they catalog it. So there's a cataloging group. And if this is a library, these would have been on the old card catalogs. And there's an external catalog service that tells them what the numbering, where it goes. Where in the Dewey Decimal System does this go? What does it look like? And they put it in the card catalog. What's missing from here is actually putting the book on the shelf, but that's okay. So they catalog and they put it in they put the information into the archive, which is going to be the card catalog in the old style systems. So also, when purchasing receives the book, they send the invoice back to the county to get reimbursed for it. So that's a data flow diagram, and that's a pretty straightforward process, but you can see that everything you need to know about how books get ordered for this library is right here. So let's walk through another example, and this is going to be personal finances. So this is going to be management. We'll start with functional decomposition, then we're going to add a data flow diagram. So here's the functional decomposition. First thing you look at in a decomposition, what are the major functions? So we're going to say, for this family, they maintain bank accounts, they earn money, they pay bills, they write checks or use their ATM card, they have some cash transactions, they have savings for retirement, and then they have a budgeting process. So now we're going to number them. That's your first step. You've identified them. Now we're going to call them 1.0, 2.0. Nothing really big there. But then we're going to break it down further. And I've only broken down 2 of them, but you can see how this looks. So for maintaining bank accounts, the functions that we have there, we have to open them, which means signature cards even now. We want to set up online access, got to balance them, and then there are going to be hiccups. All right, there are going to be late charges, there are going to be return checks, that kind of stuff. I've put all into one function. You can see that all of these could be broken down further. Earning money. So we work to earn money, then there's direct deposit that comes in. We earn interests, we've got gifts, we've got windfalls, and I haven't broken anything out. But you see how you work this down in a functional decomposition, and it could go down to a further level. Like this. So if you're going to open an account, you got to show up at the bank, you have to provide your ID, and you have to to put in your signatures, and sometimes you have to update them. Someone gets married, if someone gets unmarried, if you put another signer on the account. For online access, you're going to set up an account, you've got to maintain the password. And those are the only ones that I've really broken down here. But you kind of see how this goes. You break them down. Now, whether you have the big picture first and then you break them down, or whether you're walking through functions and you're breaking it down as you go, and then you kind of rearrange it functionally afterwards, that's really a personal preference. And to some extent, it does have something to do with how complex the system is and how it's arranged. But there's no magic to that. There's no magic to the way you go through this. Do it in whatever way works the best for you. So here's the data flow diagram. There is a Gaines and Sarson data flow diagram template on Visio. Unfortunately, it's a little more basic than I would like, but I used it so that you could see how the diagrams come out there. So here are our external entities. We have an employer. We have creditors. We have a bank. At the highest level, that's what we've got. Now, these don't have to be arranged in 1.0, 2.0, 3.0 order, and in some cases, you really just want to arrange them so that the diagram makes the most sense. But you can see what happens. We earn money. Also, this doesn't put arrows on the data flows, which I think is a big problem, but it at least shows that there's data flowing. So you get a paycheck from your employer, which goes into your bank account. Let's look at maintain bank accounts. So you're going to get statements from your bank accounts, and you have signatures at the bank. So that's at a very, very high level. We're going to break this down further so you can see it. When you pay bills, you're going to get bills from your creditor. You're going to store them some way, and you're going to pay them. And that actually is going to come out of the bank account. If you write checks, you use your ATM card, comes out of the bank account. If you do cash transactions, it's going to come out of your bank account, and we have a data store here for cash. So that data store is cash. It's money, it's bills. And saving for retirement, you have retirement accounts. And when you're budgeting, you're going to get information from your bank account. You're going to get information from your retirement account. You're going to store your budget information, and you're going to pull information from the bills. So that's all the stuff that you're bringing together to do this budget. So as you can see, often at a high level, you're not really trying to get the nitty-gritty detail of how these are happening. You're just trying to get the system overview and understand the interactions between these things. But if we break it down, let's look at maintaining bank accounts. So here we have the bank. We've added an external entity, the bank website. That could have gone at the top level. A lot of times I don't put external entities at the top level if they're only used by one and they're not a major entity. So here's what happens. Your process is you open your accounts, you do your signature cards, you do that at the bank. You got your ID. I've put that in as a data store. You got to show it to them, and there's a signature card that gets stored. And then this new account gets opened. So now you have a bank account. That's a data store that has all your bank information. You get to that on the bank website. You get statements from there, and you balance your accounts every month. Now, to do that, you need your statements. You need your check register, and that pretty much will do, you're balancing what's on the statement with what's in your check register with what you recorded. So this is another data store. And then dealing with hiccups, you're going to look at your bank account. You're going to, go to your bank. So it's very simplistic, but it has all the information that you need to understand how things flow. And if something goes wrong, or if something goes wrong, you can help pinpoint it. If the data is not flowing, you could figure that out. And if something changes, you can actually go and see how it's going to affect the rest of the system. So those are all the things that data flow diagrams are good for. So here's a system map example that I said I would show you. This is a map of the London subway system, the London Underground. This doesn't have anything to do with computers, but it does have to do with complex series of systems that are interrelated, right? So here you can see where there are connections. Where do they overlap? Where do, in this case, where do people transfer? In the case of an application or an automated system, that might be, where does data transfer? But this is a pretty complex set of information presented in a very clear way, so that if you are trying to navigate the London Underground, you can pretty much do it from here. Okay, before we do things to remember, let me show you some other I'm going to show you some other maps. So let's go, let me pull this out. I'm sorry that I don't have this in here. I did just grab them fairly recently. But I want you to see different kinds of system maps, other than data flow diagram maps, this higher level piece of stuff. Let me find them here. So I'm going to show you 3 other maps that are kind of generic, but let's see. I'm sorry that I am having a little trouble opening this. There we go. Okay, here's a map of a computer system, right? This is going to be kind of the software for a data center. So this is one way of documenting things, and you can see where data is flowing between the database management system and the components in the database management system, the applications that are in the database management system's language, the applications that are in other languages, how they go across the network protocols for people to access it, and what the operating system has to do with all of this. And here's kind of your backup. So there's one kind of systems map, and it's at a high level, and it can be broken down further, but you kind of get the idea of how that looks. I'm showing you another one. Okay, here we have administration tools. And again, you can see this is how they map into each other, how there are things that don't overlap and things that do overlap. And so again, the idea here is to provide a map that makes sense to whoever's going to use it. And let's look at one more. So here is a series of applications that share some data. And this is actually from a company called Aqualogic. You can get onto their website. You can see more about it. But you can see everything from the browsers to the content store to the the application servers to the remote servers to the databases. This is again at a system level. So you can do this from a data level. You can do it from an application level. You can do it from a series of applications levels. And you could do it for the whole system. But the whole idea behind systems and process analysis mapping is to be able to show the interrelationships amongst components. I'm trying to think if I have anything else that I can show you that would show you process, but you know, process flows are pretty straightforward. You can see, I'll find you one of those at the end of this. So let's go through the rest of this, and then for anyone who wants to hang around, I will find you another process flow so you can see that. So things to remember out of this: systems analysis deals with the flow of data and activity within and amongst systems. So those can be physical systems, those can be automated systems. It interacts with business analysis and with process analysis. And I know we weren't really going to get into process analysis here, so that's why I'm going to find you a process map for anyone who wants to hang around and see that. Systems analysis tools are available, and the main ones are functional decomposition. So there's not a specific tool for that. Data flow diagrams, and a system map. Does anyone have any questions? I know there's one on process flows, and I'm gonna go back and find you a process flow just so you can see it. Although that's really kind of another topic. Okay, let's move on here. So upcoming webinars. The basics is available with a series. You can get the series of recordings, and along with that comes Q&A session. And we only have 2 left in our advanced concepts. We have our traditional techniques, and we're going to walk through agile methodologies. All of that information is on IB Bay, and I'm going to see what I can find you as far as process flow. So that's it for the scheduled portion of the webinar, but let me see if I can find a process flow. We will go through methodology process flows in some detail in the next 2 sessions. So I'm going to see if I can find something that doesn't look like those. Give me a minute here, and I will see what I can find for you folks who wanted to see this. I know. Well, let's look at, actually, no, nothing there. Let me look at some old stuff. Okay, here we go. This is a bug process. Let's see if we can. Okay, so this is a swim lane process. So this has each of the groups. This is kind of a typical bug process. So this is QA, dev, project management, and sources. So you can see that we've got flows. Let's make it a little bigger now so you can see what the flows look like. So we have decision points on here. So this says I get a bug in one of these, and level 2 investigates. And either it's assigned to the reporter because it's waiting for information, or it's open, it goes through triage. So these opens are bug status, and you can see that we have each one of the steps. We've got some decision points. So this is a bug process from beginning to end, from reporting to triage to closure. Customizations, merges. So that's a typical, this is really a typical process. Process flow. So we can view this, view. There we go. Okay, well, we can't see it. We can't see the pieces of it very well, but you can see how they all go together. And a lot of people really like this swim lane documentation type. So you can see the process. It's a little harder to do. It's a little harder to arrange so it makes sense, but you can see the process and you can see who's doing it. So this is pretty typical. Let me see if I've got something that doesn't have swim lanes. That's a Word document. It's going to be, we really want to, nope. Nope. Nope, I'm not seeing any obvious, but you get the general idea of what the process documentation looks like. And you know, at some point, if you need to talk about these, shoot me an email and we can figure something out. Okay, so for those of you who hung around, that's a little more information on process diagrams. And if you have anything that that you want to ask me about, shoot me an email. Thanks for coming in, and I'll talk to you next time.